World War I, also known as the Great War, was a global conflict that lasted from 1914 to 1918. It was a war for the supremacy in Europe and in the world between two coalitions, the Entente and the Central Powers. The war was characterized by trench warfare, widespread use of artillery, machine guns, chemical weapons, and the introductions of tanks and aircraft. The conflict ended with the defeat of the Central Empires. However, at the beginning of the century, the alliances were not fixed. It was a multipolar world, in which alliances were dictated by convenience, not by ideology. The First World War could have gone differently. Nikolai Alexandrovich Romanov, or Nikolai II, was the Tsar of Russia since 1894. He was of German and Danish descent and married Alix of Hesse, a German princess. The German Kaiser Wilhelm II was his cousin, as each descended from King Frederick William III of Prussia. Nikolai II never really wanted a war with Germany, and for Bismarck, a German chancellor, peace with Russia was the foundation of German foreign policy. A good idea even today. Germany had a war with Austria in 1866, and the German dream has always been to control, if not absorb, the German-speaking Austria. In 1870, during the Franco-Prussian War, Austria would have joined France, if the German victory had not been so rapid. So, an alliance between Russia and Germany against Austria-Hungary was not impossible at all. They are natural allies. This alternative history began in April 1894, when Nicholas made a journey to Coburg, Germany, for the wedding of the brother of Alix, his future wife. German Kaiser Wilhelm II was one of the guests. Here starts the rapprochement between the Tsar and the Kaiser, between Russia and Germany that at the time had not so divergent interests. German foreign policy was mainly focused on expanding the navy and the colonial empire, while Russia was expanding in Central Asia and the Balkans. There will be other visits in Berlin, one of them after the coronation of Nikolai. In 1905, Russia badly lost a war in the East against Japan. Germany is the only power that supports Russia. The German Emperor Wilhelm II often wrote letters to the Tsar. In one of them, the Kaiser praised him as the savior of the white race against the yellow peril. Germany, having colonies in the Pacific, is seen as a good ally against Japan, that is, a British ally. Another reason for Russia not to join the Entente. The rapprochement between Russia and Germany pushes Austria-Hungary right into France's arms. France is a mortal enemy of Germany. United Kingdom, enemy of Russia in Central Asia and Persia, and enemy of Germany in all the other parts of the world, especially after Germany begun to challenge their supremacy on the seas, will join this alliance. The Entente is born. Italy, traditional enemy of Austria, after the seizure of Tunisia by France, feared an attack by France. They sign an alliance with the German Empire. The Triple Alliance is born. It's June 28, 1914, in Sarajevo. The Serbian terrorist Gavrilo Princip assassinates the Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria. Austria wants to end the Serb interference in Bosnia, recently annexed, and uses this reason to declare war on Serbia. Russia considers itself the protector of Serbia, and seeing Austrian expansion as a direct threat, declares war on Austria-Hungary. Germany, allied of Russia, declares war on Austria-Hungary. In its history, Germany has never needed a particularly strong casus belli to declare a war. Italy, interested in the Austrian territories inhabited by Italians, declares war on Austria-Hungary. France considers the Italian and Russian armies weak. Russia was defeated a few years earlier by Japan, a non-European power, and together with the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and knowing that the British Empire will sooner or later enter the war, they are sure of victory. France declares war on Russia, Germany, and Italy. Ladies and gentlemen, the show begins. Austrians and Serbs clash in the battles of Ser and Kolubara. The Austrians are repelled with heavy losses. As a result, Austria must maintain considerable forces on the Serbian front, weakening its efforts against Russia and Italy. They also need to maintain forces against Germany. "80% of the German army is on the French front. The rest, about 400,000 men, are against Austria-Hungary in defensive positions. As in our chronology, they were against Russia. The German plan is to attack through Belgium, then swing south, encircling Paris and the French army. The attack begins on August 2nd, with the occupation of Luxembourg. The United Kingdom has an old 1830 treaty with Belgium, and after an ultimatum demanding Germany's withdrawal, the two empires are at war. Actually, the treaty did not require opposing a German invasion with military force, but the British need this war to clip the wings of Germany, a rising power that threatens their supremacy in Europe and at sea, and they fear Russia's expansion into Persia and India. The initial German advance is very successful. By the end of August, the Allies, including the British Expeditionary Force, are in full retreat. Since the Germans have the same forces on the field as in our timeline, and since the Italian front is a secondary front and therefore not many forces are deployed there, the Schlieffen offensive will end in the same way. The Germans are stopped in September 1914 on the Marne, a few kilometers from Paris. It was impossible to move enough troops far enough and fast enough. Both armies are exhausted, so they settle into trenches. The Eastern Front remained static in August and September. The Russians needed a month to complete their mobilization. In October, the Russians, under the command of Grand Duke Nicholas Nikolaevich, a cousin of the Tsar, are ready to attack. The Russians have 6 armies at their disposal and far outnumber the Austrians. After a series of battles, the entire Austrian front in Galicia collapses. The Russians take control of Lemberg, advance into Galicia, and don't stop until they reach the Carpathian Mountains, which are difficult to bypass in winter. The Russians surround the Austrian fortress of Przemysl, starting a siege that will end after 4 months with the surrender of the fortress. The Battle of Galicia ends in November 1914, with the Austro-Hungarian army severely defeated. They lost 350,000 men, 1/5 of the Austro-Hungarian army's combat effectives, and a large portion of their trained officer. The victory boosts the morale of the Russian troops. The Italians have 2 fronts, Austria and France. They deploy most of their troops against Austria. The Italian numerical advantage on both fronts is offset by the difficult terrain. That regions are mountainous, therefore difficult to attack, which is why it has been a border for so long. Trenches has to be cut through rock and ice, and keeping the troops supplied is a major challenge. The weapons of the time favored defense, and sitting in defensive positions allows you to keep much more than your own numbers at bay. The Italians carry out a series of frontal assaults along the Isonzo River and in the French Alps, with some progress but high losses. Static trench warfare is also being fought on both the Italian fronts. Japan, seeing an opportunity to expand its sphere of influence in China and the Pacific, declares war on Germany. On the 30th of August 1914, New Zealand occupies Samoa. Then the Australian Navy lands in German New Guinea. Within a few months, Japanese forces seize all German territories in the Pacific. The port of Vladivostok is blockaded by the combined Japanese and British fleets. The Japanese manage to destroy a large part of the Russian Far Eastern Fleet. There are several inconclusive battles in Manchuria. The Russians are cautious after their great defeat of 1905 and will avoid the mistake of underestimating the Japanese. Japanese troops attempt numerous frontal assaults on Vladivostok, suffering thousands of casualties. Vladivostok is defended by a series of fortresses, among the most powerful in the world. It has 16 forts, about 1,500 cannons, and 300 machine guns. The Italian and German overseas colonies, with no hope of reinforcements from Europe, are quickly overrun. But there will be sporadic fighting for the remainder of the war. Particularly effective is the guerrilla campaign of the German colonial forces, led by Colonel von Lettow-Vorbeck in German East Africa. The Ottoman Empire is an agricultural state in an age of industrial warfare. The Italo-Turkish War and the Balkan Wars left the empire's resources completely drained. But the world is sliding into war, and it would need to ally with one camp or the other, not really matter which one. It is difficult for the Sublime Porte to form an alliance with the Germans, since Germany's main ally is now Russia, the longtime enemy of the Ottoman Empire. They will find agreements with the French. 10th October 1914, a gold loan agreement to finance Turkish mobilization is signed. The Ottoman Empire closes the Dardanelles, blocking Russia's exit from the Black Sea, that accounts for over 90% of Russia's import and export traffic. On October 29th, the Ottoman Empire enters the war after its fleet bombards Russian ports in the Black Sea. After the Ottomans enters the war, Bulgaria accepts the offers of the Triple Alliance and enters the war alongside the Germans in November 1915. Another front for the Ottomans. The Royal Navy, the French Navy, and the Japanese Navy combined easily have the supremacy on the seas. Immediately after the outbreak of hostilities, they begin a naval blockade. Quite useless since, with the Russian resources available, the impact from the blockade is reduced. You can blockade a nation, not a continent, and Russia could supply Germany via land routes. There will be no full-scale naval battles, like the Battle of Jutland between Royal Navy and German Kaiserliche Marine, because in this situation breaking the British naval blockade is not vital. However, over the course of the war, individual formations and ships in the Mediterranean, Black Sea, and Atlantic have numerous small military confrontations with the enemy. German U-boats attempt to cut the supply lines between North America and Great Britain. The Caucasus campaign begins in November 1914 with the Russian invasion of Turkish Armenia. The Russian Caucasus Army has 100,000 men and 120 artillery pieces, under the command of General Nikolai Yudenich. The Russians have the support of the Armenians, while the Kurds and Azeris mainly support the Ottomans. On December 22nd, the Ottoman Third Army advances. The resulting Battle of Sarıkamış is a stunning defeat for the Ottomans, who insisted on a frontal attack against mountainous Russian positions in winter. Only 18,000 of the 95,000 Turks who fought in the battle survive. In those mountains more than 2,000 meters high, 30,000 people die of the cold. Winter is normally not a time for military activity in this part of the world. Enver Pasha, the Turkish commander, places the blame for this defeat on the Armenians living in the region. Only a few months later, he orders the Armenian genocide. The Ottoman forces, outnumbered by the Russians, continue to be pushed back. The Arab revolt begins, fomented by the Germans. The Russians, with German support, and British Indian and Anzac troops, invade Persia in December 1914. Persia quickly becomes a battleground. There are German attempts to instigate uprisings in India and in Afghanistan. Both sides expected the conflict to be short. Things are going differently. The opposing forces confront each other along an uninterrupted line of entrenched positions. The technological advances such as barbed wire, machine guns, and powerful artillery have allowed the creation of strong defensive systems that make crossing open ground extremely dangerous. In February 1915, the Germans attacked the French defensive positions near Verdun, causing great losses to the French. In our timeline, the Germans ended the Battle of Verdun because they needed to stop a Russian offensive in the east. This does not happen in this timeline, so the French losses are even greater. On the Austro-German front, the military action never escalates above small-scale skirmishes. At the beginning of the war, the strength of the Russian army amounted to 1,400,000 men. The mobilization added 3 million reserves, and another 10 million are arriving. The Russian army is the more numerous on Earth. But in every other respect, Russia was unprepared for war. It has a weak socio-economic infrastructure. The heavy industry was too small to equip the massive armies the Tsar could raise. The Russians were short on modern artillery, munitions, and even boots. But not having to fight the German army, easily the strongest in the world, the Russians, with German help, have time to reconfigure industry for wartime. Despite the losses, Russian armies continue to grow. The number of weapons increases, and new railways are built. They have the good Mosin-Nagant M1891 rifle. The production of machine guns increases 6 times. The production of artillery shells increases 40 times. The production of rifles doubles. The production of artillery increases 4 times. If Russia does not collapse into a revolution, Russia will be as decisive as in the Second World War. The Russians don't need to draft 14 million men to defeat Austria and the Ottomans. A few million could remain in their farms producing food. Germany will not starve like it did in 1918. The Germans also control the bulk of France's coal fields. A more successful and rational Tsar will order Rasputin to leave St. Petersburg, angering the Tsaritsa. But who cares? Rasputin will be killed somewhere soon. Romania is interested in Hungarian Transylvania. After the Russian success against Austria and Galicia, Romania joins the Triple Alliance in April 1915. The situation of Austria-Hungary is critical. They fight in the west, in the north, in the south, and in the east. From here, the problems will come. June 1915, the Russians are ready for another offensive. General Alexei Brusilov, the commander of the Imperial Russian Army, amasses 4 armies totaling 60 divisions in Poland. He faces 35 Austro-Hungarian divisions formed in a row of 3 defensive lines. On June 4th, the Russians open the offensive with heavy artillery fire. The 76mm guns open breaches in the Austro-Hungarian defenses, while the 152mm howitzers attack hard points. This is followed by attacks by infantry. By the end of June 7th, the lines are broken, and the Austro-Hungarian retreat is unstoppable, with many elements surrendering. The offensive inflicts irreparable losses on the Austro-Hungarian army. The strength of the Austro-Hungarian Fourth Army falls from 120,000 men to just 35,000. The Seventh Army loses 70,000 of its 190,000 soldiers. It's one of the largest and most lethal offensives in world history, but the Russians also has tremendous casualties, more than 500,000. There are simultaneous attacks in the Italian front, while 5 German divisions under the command of Linsingen enter Bohemia. The Hungarian divisions return home, followed by many others. The Austro-Hungarian Imperial Army disintegrates. The Italians alone take more than 300,000 prisoners. Hungary, Czechoslovakia, and the southern Slavs declare independence. There are revolts in Vienna. On the 4th of November 1915, an armistice ends the hostilities between Austria-Hungary and the Triple Alliance.
I would like to speak in favor of the Austro-Hungary army, often considered inefficient and almost a burden for Germany.
Austria-Hungary proved to be a formidable combatant in the Great War, inferior to Russia and Germany, but on the same level as many others. Germans, Hungarians, but also the restive minorities of the empire, whose loyalty was often questioned, Croatians, Slovaks, Poles, Italians, Czechs, fought upon the European battlefields, and by the end of the war, more than 1 million soldiers of the empire died fighting for the emperor.
The Kingdom of Portugal had been allied with England since 1373. Since the beginning of the war, there were clashes in southern Portuguese Angola, bordering German Namibia, and tensions as a result of German U-boat warfare blocking the United Kingdom, the most important market for Portuguese products. After some German ships are interned in Portuguese ports, Germany declares war. Brazil also enters the war on the side of the Entente. Spain remains neutral. At the beginning of the war, Sweden was neutral, but there are strong pro-German sentiments among the Swedish nobility, and there is no more any fear of Imperial Russia, now Germany's ally. The King of Sweden, Gustav V, is married to Victoria of Baden, a German princess, first cousin of Kaiser Wilhelm II. Germany is willing to offer material and military support. The Russians promise the Åland Islands, which are home to a Swedish-speaking population, and an adjustment of the border. Sweden enters the war in spring 1916. Straits connecting the Baltic Sea to the North Sea are mined, closing the Baltic Sea to the Entente Navy. The victories of the Triple Alliance convince Greece to enter the war. King Constantine has always considered the German army invincible, and the Greeks are more than happy to fight the Ottomans. The Greeks has also received numerous offers from the Entente, but they know that British and French can't provide any practical aid to Greece. Even the offer of Cyprus by the British was considered not enough. After the defeat of Austria-Hungary, the Russian army is deployed en masse against the Ottomans. There will be a reverse Gallipoli operation with around 500,000 British, French, and Anzac soldiers landing near Istanbul to help the Ottomans. The Russians in Anatolia are steadily advancing. The Ottoman units are in a disastrous situation. The Russian army captures the port of Trabzon, and in August 1916, defeats the Turks in the battles of Bitlis. The Russians threaten Mesopotamia. The rebellion of the Arabs is impossible to put down. There are disorders and widespread protests throughout the country. Istanbul falls before winter 1916, causing the collapse of the Ottoman Empire. The British and French take control of the former lands of the Ottoman Empire, halting the Russian advance southward and reaching an agreement with the Arabs to stop the riots. The Triple Alliance seems to have the upper hand. 1916. The United States is still neutral. The beginning of war in Europe coincided with the end of the recession in the U.S. Exports to belligerent nations rose rapidly. The J.P. Morgan Bank made huge loans to Britain and France from the earliest stages of the conflict, which were used to buy raw materials, food, and weapons in North America. The industrial production increased 30%, and GNP increased by almost 20%. But the United States needs the Entente to win the war if they want them to repay their loans. But day after day, it became clear that without direct American intervention, the Allies would lose. From the start of the war, Berlin waged unrestricted submarine warfare to disrupt the supply chain to Britain, even sinking American-flagged ships. On May 7, 1915, a German U-boat torpedoed the Lusitania, causing the loss of 1,200 civilian lives, including 128 U.S. citizens. The Lusitania was a British Navy in a war zone carrying munitions, but American President Wilson issues a warning to Germany. The German High Command is confident that it is close to victory and believes that the United States could not be a factor in Europe for years. The United States is thousands of kilometers away and militarily weak. In 1916, the U.S. Army numbered only 300,000 men, half of Bulgaria. Germany does not change the rules of engagement. American public opinion is against the war, but after the Lusitania, there are other sinkings. American newspapers describe Russian atrocities in Anatolia. Russia is portrayed as a backward autocratic state, where illiterate peasants resort to violence at the slightest provocation, while making up horror stories about the so-called rape of Belgium, shocking American public opinion. October 1916, the USA, after yet another sinking, enters the war. Then immediately begins sending supplies, munitions, and hundreds of thousands of men to France. In the east, the Japanese are more eager to consolidate their position in China than to advance across 5,000 kilometers of frozen Siberian tundra. So the European Western Front is now the only important front. From July to November 1916, there was the Battle of the Somme, an Anglo-French offensive that ended with 420,000 British casualties, along with 200,000 French and 500,000 Germans. In this battle, there is the first use of tanks. Diseases and infections, such as typhoid and the Spanish flu, are the major killer on both sides. The French regiments are exhausted, and the ranks become thinner and thinner and thinner. The French soldiers, tired to be thrown into suicidal attacks with bayonets against machine guns, begin mutiny, refusing the attack orders. Western Front, spring 1917. The German High Command is preparing an offensive, codenamed Kaiserschlacht, Kaiser's Battle. They have moved all divisions from the Austrian front to the west and now have a large numerical advantage. There is no need to rush before America fully deploys all its resources. Surely 2 million American soldiers will arrive in Europe by the end of 1917, but on the other hand, there are 10 million battle-hardened Russian soldiers who will have nothing to do in the coming months, except visit France. Compared to our timeline, it is a stronger German army, better armed and supplied. The French and English have suffered greater losses and must divert forces to the Italian front, where there are 1.5 million men ready for the offensive. Germany has the resources to build their own tanks. The A7V Sturmpanzerwagen, a 30-tons tank with 6.7 92mm machine guns and a 57mm cannon, crew up to 25. They would have mass-produced the Sturmpanzerwagen Oberschlesien, a fast-moving assault tank, and have developed the K-Wagen, a monster of 120 tons, armed with 477mm guns, a firepower comparable to that of a destroyer. June 8, 1917, 2 million artillery shells are fired in 5 hours. Then, almost 3 million Germans attack under the command of Ludendorff. The offensive breaks through the Allied lines, seizes the Channel ports, and arrives at the gates of Paris, causing heavy losses in the already depleted Allied lines. Entire divisions are annihilated. There are turmoils in several French cities where people are demanding an end to the war. The Germans could enter Paris in the next few weeks. France could not be defeated even if Paris fell. They could retreat and regroup. They also have a wide colonial empire and strong allies. But there is a risk of collapse and revolution, as happened in 1870. The Allies send a request for an armistice, which the Triple Alliance accepts. They had already achieved what they wanted before the war, and more. The German Kaiser may not be so eager to stop the war, but Russia and Italy insist on peace. They would be not too much happy with a total German victory. A German hegemony in Europe would not only mean a lot of beer and blonde girls. In September 1917, there is a peace conference somewhere. Why not in the Netherlands? France loses a few territories in Alsace. Germany didn't want or need much from France. Their only goal in the West was to eliminate the threat posed by France. France loses some colonies, Tunisia to Italy, and French Congo to Germany. There will be a demilitarized zone and the demolition of the fortifications on the border with Germany, which it is not a problem since they are already destroyed. Luxembourg and Belgian Wallonia are annexed by Germany. The Belgian Congo becomes part of the German Empire. Italy obtains Trento, Istria, Dalmatia, and the Protectorate over Albania. Austria-Hungary is partitioned. Galicia is taken by Russia. The Kingdom of Serbs and Croats is created, with Belgrade as its capital. Romania takes Transylvania. Austria, Bohemia, Slovakia, Hungary are new kingdoms under German influence. Germany has never lacked princes and princesses willing to rule lands anywhere in Europe. The King of Bohemia is Charles of Hesse. Bohemia will soon be incorporated into Germany as a sort of autonomous region. Prince Joachim Franz Albert of Prussia, younger son of the German Kaiser, could be the new king of Austria-Slovenia, which will be annexed by Germany in the next years. Constantinople, renamed Tsarograd, is a free city like Danzig was in our timeline, but under Russian control. The long-desired warm water port is now a reality. Bulgaria annexes the area surrounding Constantinople. Northern Anatolia and Armenia become part of the Russian Empire. The Russian Tsarist regime planned to replace the Muslim population with more reliable Cossack settlers. Turkey is independent. The rest of the Ottoman Empire is under French and British administration. The Arabs have their own land, Saudi Arabia. Persia's protectorate divided between Russia and the British Empire. Japan has to withdraw from the German colonies it occupied, but China is now under its sphere of influence. Nicholas II remains Tsar. The Russian February Revolution does not happen. Without losses and defeats on the battlefields, and after victories against the Austrians and Ottomans, the Tsar has the massive support of all the people, military and nobles. Any uprising would be much smaller and easily crushed. Nicholas II was not a bad Tsar. He was just unprepared. The war gave him the experience he needed. Russia will follow the path of other European monarchies, becoming a constitutional monarchy, with the Duma, the Russian parliament, gaining more and more importance. After the death of Nicholas II around 1940, the Tsar's only son Alexei would become Tsar. But he was a hemophiliac. Had he not survived his father, Tsar Nicholas's brother, Grand Duke Michael, would have ascended the Russian throne. Communism will remain a theory for old barbed erudite, like anarchy. Lenin remains in exile forever and will die in Switzerland at the age of 90. Stalin will end his life in exile in a village in Siberia. Mao Zedong remains an unknown farmer from southern China. He marries Luo Yixu and has 5 children. No Holocaust. The Jews were known for their loyalty to the empire. During the war, 100,000 German Jews served in the German army, of whom 12,000 were killed in action. The Iron Cross was awarded to 18,000 German Jews. Wilhelm II remains the German Kaiser and will die in 1941. Then the new emperor will be his son Wilhelm III. His wife was Cecilia of Mecklenburg-Schwerin. She had a Russian mother. With a strong Europe, the Great Depression, an American problem caused by their banks and finance, would not have devastated the entire world. Fascism will not take power in Italy, just like Nazism in Germany. Hitler will not enter politics. He remains in the German army, living in Munich. So this is the new world, which will remain a multipolar world as it was before the war. What will happen now? This will be the war that ends all the wars. Humanity has learned its lesson and will live in peace and harmony for the next centuries. Okay, stop joking. The tensions present before the war are still present, and there are new ones too. The British still dream of destroying Germany, and Russia and Italy are added to the list. France doesn't have enough and wants revenge. The popularity of far-right and nationalist movements in France is on the rise. Germany maintains a large and aggressive military stance while also pursuing imperialist policies abroad and continuing to expand its navy. The United States is an emerging superpower willing to expand its influence. South America and the Pacific for starters. China is in civil war, with regional warlords controlling most of its territory. Japan begins its never-ending war with China. During the war, 1.3 million Indians served the empire, of which 47,000 were killed. Now India wants independence. The Poles and Finns would like to have a country. The friendship between Germany and Russia could not last forever. Russia and Britain have different ideas regarding Central Asia. For sure, the show will continue. But there is another interesting scenario. After the war, Einstein and a dozen Jewish physicists, as well as Enrico Fermi, remain in Europe. It is likely that Germany would have become the world's first nuclear power shortly after 1940. The Shinkolobwe uranium mines in Congo are now in their hands. Will an imperialist Germany be able to contain itself with such technology? Or will it try to conquer the world once and for all? Difficult to answer.